Can folks see that slide?
Yes.
Very good. All right. Well, I'll just start by saying thank you for having me here today. I don't have all the answers, but hopefully I know a little bit more than you do, and I can help bring a little bit of enlightenment to Lyme. I'm thrilled to talk with communities who are interested in community solar. It's part of what we have to do, make this transition happen and work. So I welcome your questions. I look forward to a discussion, and I'll give you what I have to start with, and we can go from there. Now, let me make this. I'd like to make the people go away. Sorry about that. That's it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Say goodbye.
Yeah, I can, that's the best I can do. It's unfortunately,
all right.
it's up here. It's a reflection of what's on my computer.
All right.
Zoom's not gonna let me get rid of the people.
Okay, I'm gonna stop my video, so I'm not looking. I guess I'm not gonna stop my video because I'm on OWL. Let me tell you a little bit about Revision Energy to start with. We're a company that started in Maine. We've been around for 20 years for a solar company. That is a long, long time. We service New Hampshire, Maine, and part of Massachusetts. And we have offices both in Enfield and Brentwood, New Hampshire, and we cover the whole state. Our culture is that of a B Corp. We are a triple bottom line kind of company. We're very interested in solar energy. We're interested in being a profitable and long-standing business, but we also care an awful lot about the environment and the people who live in it as well. So we are certified B Corp. We scored 1 point recently less than Patagonia. And if you know Patagonia, they're a pretty sustainable company. We're also 100% employee owned. So my business cards, if you happen to pick one up tonight, which are in my back pocket, says that I am a co-owner, and indeed that is true. But I am one of almost 400 co-owners. So that's a little bit about Revision Energy. And let me give you a little bit about myself. I've been with Revision for 2 years now, which isn't a very long time, but I've learned very quickly that people in the solar business are coming in so fast that we, the new, are dwarfing those, the old, or those with more experience. We expect to hire about 80 new positions this year. Solar is growing and growing and growing, and it is an exciting place to be. My background is in forestry and land conservation, so I am the last person who wants to see a piece of property changed in a way that is negative. But I also recognize that there are going to be times when we have to put solar on land that is green for a temporary period of time as we work through this transition, because there just aren't enough roofs and parking lots to put all that solar on. Not that solar is the only answer. Solar is one of the solutions to the climate change crisis. Yes.
You mentioned transition. What are we transitioning to?
We're transitioning from fossil fuels to electricity, or we're transitioning out of fossil fuels.
Right.
And electricity is one of the things that we'll transition to.
Right.
Does that do it for you, David?
Well, the other transition from smaller solar arrays to larger.
Well, yes, that I don't think we ever want to see the smaller arrays go away, because they tend to be the ones that are on the rooftop and more innocuous. But yes, we are going towards some larger ones to make this transition happen more quickly. Yes.
No, I'm all for rooftop.
I know you are. All right, let's see if I can actually make this move. There we go. I'm going to just go over some of the scales of solar, so we're sure we know what we're talking about when we say community solar. Residential is the rooftop, and not always rooftop solar, that provides energy to a house, usually from 2 to 20 kilowatts. Some houses use more electricity than others. Some are sippers, some are gulpers. That energy is on site, and it is net metered, which means that you have some kind of a trade with the utility that allows you to produce energy that they take off when you have excess, and you get a credit when that can be used when you need it. My house is the one in the upper right. We put solar on our house with revision 12 years ago. Commercial solar is another thing that revision does, and it is a really important way to make this transition happen. They are on-site systems that power the need for electricity at a building or some site that uses electricity. It is also net metered, a little differently for commercial, but still net metered. In New Hampshire, we can only do up to 1 megawatt for commercial. If there is a municipality and they're building in that municipality and they need more than 1 megawatt for their own use, we can do more than 1 megawatt, up to 5 megawatts. There are only a handful of towns and cities in New Hampshire that use that much electricity. Commercial arrays can power a school, the lower right.
Sorry. 5 megawatts. If the town of Lyme wanted to set up a municipal power system for the benefit of the residents of the town of Lyme, could it be 5 megawatts?
I have no idea, because I don't know, the utilities could tell us that if they wanted to. And if you do go to community power, which is what is being talked about a lot now, the utilities are required to give you that information. You'll know how much everybody in town uses who is on a utility or a third party supplier. But right now, I have nothing to go on for that. Lyme is a small town. And I suspect that Lyme, even with all of its residents, might not use 5 megawatts, but I'm not familiar with the commercial or industrial uses in Lyme that might be high powered users, probably not much.
But
Yeah.
it would use more than 1 megawatt.
Yes, probably more than 1 megawatt for everyone in town. Yeah, I would suspect so. That would not probably be considered a municipal array based on the state of New Hampshire's definitions. It is for municipal use, school use, or county use only that exception works. There is legislation going through right now that will broaden that some, and we're hopeful, feel like there might be a 50-50 chance that that is going to pass through the House and be signed by the governor. We're holding our breath, and more than that, we're working to make it happen.
And that broadening, as I understand it, would just allow the system to be located in some other municipality, is that right?
That is one of the, it's really hard. These are moving targets, and things have moved a lot in the last few weeks. So that was one of the proposals, to allow any municipal array that is built anywhere to service any array that is used to service municipality schools and counties, to be located anywhere and to serve multiple users. So that it doesn't have to be one town, one school district, one county that's using all that energy. So we've got our fingers crossed, and we're trying to work towards that. Commercial can also be small or large. The lower right is Dover High School, brand new school, put solar right on it. The upper right is the new Bank of New Hampshire stage in Concord, a relatively small venue, filled up their rooftop. Left top is Antioch College or Antioch University in Keene, and that services some of the buildings around that array. And I think that the lower left is Millipore in the southwestern part of the state. Not sure of the exact location, but these are Peterborough. Okay, thank you. These are all arrays that Revision has done. And then there's community solar. Community solar is off-site. It is generating electricity to go onto the distribution lines, which is what runs outside of your house and then comes with a line to your house, or runs outside of your office or whatever building you might work in and comes in. Typically, they are moving, distributing energy from the grid to the house. What these community solar arrays do is they generate energy and distribute it through those lines to the closest user. Electrons, I've been told electrons isn't the right thing to talk about, but I'm going to talk about electrons anyway, because I'm not an electrician, I'm a forester. The electrons can be used anywhere in the utility. But if you are a business or a family who is using the energy from this array, you are either paying for some of a share in this array. I'll get to this in more detail later, but you are not getting the electrons that this array produces. This array is producing those electrons. They get used up by whoever it is who's nearby, who needs them. And you get the credit or get a discount on your electricity for being associated with this array. We'll do more on that. We talked a little bit about net metering. This is also net metered. It is a credit system, even though it's not situated at the place where it's being used. It can also be 1 to 5 megawatts, though in New Hampshire, those regulatory issues cause us not to be able to use these more than 1 megawatt right now. We're hopeful over time that we will be able to go up to 5 megawatts for any purpose, but for right now, we're stuck at the 1 megawatt threshold. The land for these is typically leased from someone who is not taking off the electricity. So in the lower right is the land of a farmer in Maine who had a wet field that always bogged down his equipment. And he chose to put solar in that field. He leases that land to us and we pay him an annual fee for that privilege. The upper right is these are all main arrays. And let's talk about size. The upper right is 2.5 megawatts in size. Since this was taken and since this array was done, solar panels have gotten a little bit more efficient and it takes fewer panels to produce that 2.5 megawatts. So the array would be slightly smaller than this for 2.5.
How old is this photo?
This is
Roughly.
probably 3 years old. Yeah. The one on the left is still not quite complete. It's a 5 megawatt. I actually walked on this site last summer. It is about 22 or 24 acres all told. The ratio tends to be 1 megawatt can fit onto 5 to 7 acres. There's efficiencies that come with larger arrays. So the larger arrays tend to be able to fit more megawatts on less land, whereas a 1 megawatt system would need more land than that 5 megawatt system because the shade buffers that we have to account for are a larger proportion of the array itself or the size itself. The one in the lower left, beautiful spot in Maine, these are again all in Maine, is a 0.5 megawatt, about 0.5 megawatts. New Hampshire is, and revision, I believe that there is one community solar array of these sizes in New Hampshire that may have been done by Norwich Solar. I'm not sure. There is one small array less than 100 kilowatts that was done by revision as a group net metered situation. And I'll show you that one a little later.
So Beth, could I ask
Yes,
you?
sure
on
can.
The efficiency, when you were showing the rooftop municipal solars, they seem to be more efficient. I mean, it wasn't 24 acres.
Right,
that
right.
was generating 5 megawatts in that case.
None of those were more than 1 megawatt. And you're right, those panels can be, they're fairly flat, so they don't shade each other, so there's no space in between them. So they take up less space. As soon as you have ground mounted systems that are angled for the best angle for the sun, you have to allow some space in between so that they don't shade each other. There's pluses and minuses to both of those.
Can I just ask you, what
Sure
is
thing.
the thing with the 1 megawatt limitation in New Hampshire?
It is a requirement that we not exceed 1 megawatt of net metered electricity.
Why?
It is a political issue, and so
So
we
it's
leave it at that.
protecting the utilities, I assume, to not provide competition?
I can't tell you the reason. It is something that has been in front of the legislature at least once
Mhm.
and passed through both the House and the
Mhm.
Senate and was vetoed.
So, I mean, it's not because they think there's too much land use impact or something like that. This is because it is messing with the market.
I think the stated reason is that, the thought is that net metering disadvantages people who can't have solar. And there has been a study this past year that shows that that is not the case.
That's a lot of people can't have, yeah, I mean, the community systems, you can't have solar, so that's why you would want that to buy into it, right?
What they can
Yes, yeah.
specifically say on this topic.
I understand, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I know what it's, the ISO, the New England ISO, there's a big article about how difficult they've been,
Mhm.
and what is it called, the PUC is
Yeah,
and from what I've read, it's not been a forward-looking group.
But you'll notice that Maine has 5 megawatts. systems
Yes.
in New Hampshire.
Revision has
Right,
done 5 megawatt
right,
systems
right,
in
yeah.
Maine. Yes,
I have some experience in Maine. And so some wealthy people did net metering on some farmland. And then took it over to a lake. So the people whose farmland was removed felt that they were being disadvantaged to take it elsewhere. It
Okay,
would be like building a power plant somewhere and shipping it to Los Angeles or something out of.
yeah,
That
okay.
was, I know people were upset about it.
yeah. And I'll leave that. There are lots of reasons why people, individuals, some people don't like this happening. I can't speak for them. I think this is a great idea and what we have to do. And clearly it can be done. It's being done in every state and province around us. Because the policies are different.
Mhm.
And New Hampshire is slow in adopting, and we have to do this. So leaving the politics out of it.
No, I wondered if it was just the politics or,
Yeah.
was there some other reason?
No,
Yeah,
it's
Okay,
it's
and then
political.
more specific to the wet farm site.
Mhm.
Are there special accommodations for installations in wet areas? And can you just describe what the difference might be between a dry and a wet installation?
Sure. In New Hampshire, we cannot and will not put an array in a wetland. There are sites that in the spring are wet, but they are not wetlands. They're not designated as wetlands. They don't have the characteristics of wetlands, and we can install there.
Mhm,
This was not a wetland. It was simply a wet site.
mhm.
And the farmer wanted to be out there in the times of year when it is wet in the spring and during the time to harvest. And this was the place where he wanted to do this.
Mhm.
The lease payments for him, the reason he did it is that the lease payments will help him pass this on to his children and allow his children to continue to have the farm as an open space and a farm without as much difficulty as it is for farmers to hold on to their land.
I
Yeah.
think what you're saying is that he's making more money leasing his land than he can make
growing crops,
Yes, on this, yes, yeah,
on that piece,
on this piece,
the
yeah.
wet piece.
or maybe on any of this land.
I'll say that, lease payments are reliable, annual, and modest. Nobody's gonna retire because they have leased their land for solar. But it is a steady income that is passive. You don't do anything for it. You lease your land. You don't have to be hiring people, firing people, putting up infrastructure, supervising, or any of that. So for the people who that appeals to, leasing land is a good option.
Is there a typical rule of thumb as to what this payment looks like or how much it is?
I'll give you a round number. And it varies depending on, for a site that is right on a road with three-phase power with no obstacles at all, it's gonna be better than what I quote you, but not twice, not a quarter times more. $6,500 annually per megawatt, plus 2% increase annually. So it is modest, but it is comparable to an agricultural lease or other non-construction kinds of activities that you could use your land for. All right. So the people who use energy from these arrays can be families. We have some incentives to do low to moderate income housing coverage for these. Schools, municipalities, hospitals, businesses, nonprofits, basically anybody. And it depends on how the array is set up as a business.
Quick question.
Sure.
If you were to lease land like this,
Mhm.
does that take your property out of current use?
It likely will, yes. And in New Hampshire, that will be something that we have to work out.
Yep.
If a town owned a affordable housing
Mhm.
situation, and could their municipal system provide to that residential, even though it's not, it's not the town offices or the,
Mhm.
highway garage.
It wouldn't qualify it for that 1 megawatt, but you wouldn't need the 1 megawatt for that. Let's get to what a municipal system might look like.
Okay.
Because what we're talking about when we're talking about town offices is a municipal ownership, but the community housing is probably a housing authority or individual ownership or lease situation. So they're different entities, so they would interact differently with an array.
Okay.
Beth, hi, this is Hunter on Zoom. I have a question for you concerning community solar before you move on, if that's okay.
Sure. Yes.
Let's say, for example, that you have an enterprising farmer or landowner that would like to build a large scale array under 1 megawatt and sell that power to others. That is, that they wouldn't lease the land to someone else, that they would really be in the power generation business. Is there a model for that? And how does the state of New Hampshire or towns handle that?
It would be a challenging enterprise to enter into without any experience. And even for Revision, who has done it in Maine, it's challenging to do it in New Hampshire because the rules, we have relationships with the utilities. We know the landscape in New Hampshire, but finding the right way to get everything in line is a challenge. It's not undoable by any means, but it is something that has to be, you have to go through the process. And you would need people with experience in, and you could hire out these things, development, environmental, engineering, construction, maintenance, finance, investing, and interconnection and off-taking of electricity. A company like Revision has developed those skills throughout its business, throughout its co-owners. And if there was a business that had all of that, or had access to all of that, you could probably figure out how to do it, but it would be challenging. And it probably would be very expensive. I mean, it's very expensive anyway. So I wouldn't say it's undoable. I would say there isn't a model. But if you had land and you wanted to hire a company with all of those expertise to build something on your land, that is doable also. Does that answer your question, Hunter?
Yeah, thank you. My question was really about the legal basis, not necessarily whether anyone would be
Okay,
insane enough to embark on something like that. So thank you.
okay, you're welcome.
So you could do it in Vermont or Maine much more easily.
I don't know if you could. If you had all of those expertise I don't know that it's easier.
That people are doing it in Vermont quite a bit.
I'm not familiar with you guys have the view of Vermont from here that I don't have in Canterbury. I don't know what the atmosphere is like in Vermont, and what the any of that is like there. There is a lot more solar happening in all of the areas around New Hampshire because our political regulations don't allow us to be as prolific with these as the other states. Something that's really important to know is that each of these arrays can only service off-takers or electrical customers from the utility that it is located in. So if you're in Eversource territory and you have an array, you can only sell electricity or provide electricity to users in Eversource's territory. Same with Liberty. So since you have both utilities in Lyme, if you want to be able to say that all of your residents, all of your electrical use in Lyme is being generated here and is renewable, you would have to do at least 2 arrays to cover that.
What if the array was adjacent to both, where the 260 Eversource and then
It would go onto one set of wires or the other.
couldn't be set up to go on both?
No, it's a pretty hard and fast rule. So, yeah. And I just want to be clear that when the time frame is over 25 to 35 years for a community solar array, we are required to decommission it. And we will recycle every bit of the array. It would be foolish not to do that. But everything, it's aluminum, it's silicon, it's some metals and things like that. There's a lot of metal racking and wiring, and those are all recyclable.
Are there provisions, if companies disappear, are there provisions for?
Each contract is different. And that is a question that landowners ask often, and we're willing to work with people about what that looks like. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're out of my sight, Tim, so. go ahead.
Is there an average cost for a 1 megawatt system?
No.
Approximately?
No.
It varies a lot. It varies a lot.
It does vary a lot. It varies depending on what town it's in and what they're gonna do with taxes. It depends on whether it's on Route 101 in Milford and has lots of exposure, or if it's a back farm that's further off the area. It depends on if it's flat or if it's not flat. Depends on if it's rocky and we have to drill or not drill. You're looking at upwards of beyond $3 million.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because we heard somewhere like $1 million to $1.5 million, I think, for 1 meg, but
Time has a lot to do with it. Everything has gotten more expensive. groceries, gas, solar. And all of the electrical components that go with solar, all of the metal racking that goes with solar, and even the solar panels are more expensive than they were a year ago.
On the
I-
topic of,
Go ahead.
topic of decommissioning, are companies able to provide a bond or something that there's gonna be money in the bank for the decommissioning, and what percentage of the construction costs are you seeing being set aside for that activity?
I don't know. It's a long way out. So of course, landowners want some assurance. We don't really want to bond something today for something we're gonna have to do 35 years from now, because
Right.
that ties up money. I think it would be fair to say that we work on an individual basis to figure that out. I'm not on the legal side. So I'm not sure what we have done with those contracts in the past when those questions have come up. So I
Okay.
don't mean to be, I just don't know. I don't really know.
So you haven't bonded.
I haven't been involved in anything that is bonded. As I said, New Hampshire is just getting started with this, and we haven't brought things through to even construction at this point on one of these. We're getting closer. So we're still
You do have solar arrays, large solar arrays.
yes, we do. We have large solar arrays on commercial buildings in New Hampshire. We have all of these are revision, solar arrays in Maine.
And how have you handled the decommission?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry, David. I wish I could say for sure which way it goes, but I'm in negotiations, or our attorneys are in negotiations with several landowners now who are asking that question, and I don't know how it's gonna be resolved.
Most of my experience is on the utility scale side, so larger than the 5 megawatts we're talking about here, where there'd be some sort of permitting process, and usually as part of that, there'll be some sort of decommissioning process. For a smaller project like this, I would expect you probably use some sort of rule of thumb, and you would probably, I would say it's very reasonable to say it can kick in immediately for a smaller scale project like this, and you might say, start building it up at year 10 and plan to fully fund it for the 10-year period there. Just knowing that the solar panels and most of the equipment is still useful in year 10 if the company were to go belly up, and you wouldn't really be out anything, because you wouldn't be looking at scrap value, you'd be looking at selling something used.
Or you take over the solar.
Or you just
the power. You don't own the power.
Yeah. Interesting. Good.
Speaking of utility scale, this is not something that we do with revision at this point. I haven't seen a piece of property like this in New Hampshire yet. Not one with solar panels on it, and not one that's that flat for that far. There is one utility scale solar that shows on a map that is in development in New Hampshire for 110 megawatts, 355 acres, which is approximately the size of 2 1/3 of a golf course. So that gives you a little bit of scale. I wanna go back here because I've been, go ahead,
Yeah, I
and
just
then
wanna
back to you.
Go back to the decommissioning question, because I
Okay,
think that's
sure.
probably of interest to a lot of folks here. Can you kind of talk about, in terms of restoring the land after you take can you talk about like what's under the ground? I presume you're just driving piles in and not using concrete foundations.
Yeah. That's a question we're gonna get to, so if you can hold on to that, that would be great. Go ahead.
There was somebody.
Hunter, yeah, okay, thank you.
Hi, Beth. I just wanted to back you up. There was a question about the average cost per megawatt, and there is a really nice resource from NREL that lays out the average prices across the United States, including in our area. That I'm happy to pass that along to that person if they write to us. maybe Hebe is there, can give some contact info for that.
Great. I'd love to have that also, Hunter, if you'd be willing.
Yeah, Hunter, if you
Yeah,
wanna just
sure, happy to
email
pass it on.
to me, I can pass it out to anybody who wants it.
Okay,
Great. I threw this in just so you could see the scale.
Where is this?
I think Utah or somewhere in that area. It's in the Southwest. It's not New England. All right, so why solar on our landscape? A lot of people are asking, why put it on the land? Why not just put it on the rooftop? Blah, blah, blah. All of that is reasonable. I don't want to put it on the land either. I'd rather have the land be what it is today. But New Hampshire is headed more towards North Carolina, South Carolina climate. Fossil fuels are causing some of those issues. We're beginning to electrify everything. I just ordered my electric car. Revision is looking to be all electrified in our fleet. And so are a lot of other people. Air source heat pumps are a much more popular these days than they were before, and have eliminated a lot of oil and natural gas use. And even school buses are going electric, even in New Hampshire. So these are the reasons why we need solar, and solar isn't the only way to do electric to eliminate fossil fuels, but it is one of the main ways that is going to be depended on. So let's get into the nitty gritty now that we've talked about scale. The basics of community solar. Again, just to reiterate, it's off-site, the land is leased, it's net metered. These power lines are three-phase power, and what makes them three-phase is the fact that they have a crossbar at the top of the utility pole, and there are three wires that go from crossbar to crossbar. It is a higher, more robust distribution system, and it is the only distribution system that a larger community solar power array can be fed into. It is possible to do small arrays on single phase power, but we'll get to that. It is very expensive. We'll just leave it at that for now. Again, this is distributed energy going out on the distributed lines. There are no additional transmission lines needed for these. And we do need some upgrade of the grid to make this work in many instances. But this is local energy just by the fact that it is produced and used in the same utility. Eversource exists in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, but their lines don't cross. I mean, their systems are separate. So any Eversource generated electricity from solar in New Hampshire stays in New Hampshire in Eversource's territory. Liberty is even more local than that. We've talked about 1 megawatt taking 5 to 7 acres. Typically, smaller is possible. Half a megawatt in a really ideal place will work, but the smaller you get, the more perfect the situation has to be for solar, and we'll get to what that perfect situation is in just a bit. Again, we have incentives, monetary financial incentives to build for low and moderate income housing, and we're working very hard on that. And we have incentives through the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed last year to locate on brownfields. We're very interested in doing that, and we are actively looking for brownfields to build on.
So a question about that, because for the planning board, we're regulatory, we can't say, you know, we have 5 brownfields or we have 2 brownfields. How does that work? How does that translate for you as a company? How do you get access to those brownfields when you're going into an area?
How do we get access to any land? You talk with the landowner and see if they're interested in leasing the land.
Okay, but it's not something that's regulated. It's just something that happens to be available as an option in the zoning in that area.
It's,
George, he's going.
I'm not gonna address zoning
Why not?
because I don't know your zoning
I know.
regulations.
That would help me skip.
But in essence, the incentive comes from the federal government, and it is an incentive to give an additional credit, income tax credit for arrays that are built on brownfields. So in that way,
I see,
it
I see,
becomes
I get it.
more valuable for an investor
Yeah.
to build something like this. It becomes less expensive to build something like this as long as somebody can take that that incentive, that credit.
I get it. Thank you.
All right,
About
go ahead.
can three-phase be buried?
Can it?
Have to be up in the air on a pole.
Oh, I'll get to that, yes. Maybe it's this one. This one, here's your answer. The one on the right, the power line on the right is also three-phase power. In fact, I saw a whole bunch of these as I drove through Bristol today from the wind turbine. So as you are closer to new and modern electrical generation facilities, like the wind power plant, you will see, or where the grid has been upgraded, you will see some of these electrical lines along the road that look different, but they are three-phase power, even though they don't have the crossbars. Well, I can see some crossbars.
Can you bury them though?
Can you vary them?
Bury.
Bury them. Again, I'm not sure. I don't know. These are the lines that run along the road. So there may be some roads that have them buried, but I'm not. I can,
Property, yes.
I can tell you.
In New York, that people were concerned about buried lines, that it affects your health because it comes in electromagnetic field.
Yeah.
With the ground up.
Yeah, I've had people tell me that solar is bad because of electromagnetic fields as well. And I don't know anything about that. So I apologize. So go ahead.
Three-phase power, are there? I guess I should be, is there a particular voltage that the lines run, or is it like you have transmission lines that have varying sizes that carry higher voltage? Or is the local distribution lines all pretty much the same carrying capacity, I guess,
Yeah, I can't talk about the technical side of it because my electrical knowledge is basic, but there are some three-phase lines that have capacity to take generation, and there are three-phase lines that don't have capacity to take generation. And it may be because the lines simply don't have that capacity, or maybe that there's enough distribution coming in or generation coming into the lines that all of that capacity has been taken. It depends some on the lines, but it mostly depends, as I understand it, on the substation and the capacity of the substation to handle that generation. Go ahead.
So when you say three-phase, you include in that a nearby substation, some sort of transformer station or something?
Three-phase comes off of a substation, and when we are sending energy out, it's going, in theory, towards, the electrical side is really, I'm in the solar business.
So it's both the phone lines plus a substation that is necessary.
Yes.
So when you have to build in the middle of an area that just has single phase, then you need to build both.
Okay, we'll get to that. The utility scale requires the building of a substation. For community scale, we're not going to be building substations. In fact, if the substation needs to be upgraded, this is a project that is not going to be financially feasible. So we'll get to a little more detail on that. Generally, it's three-phase lines that are within 4 miles of a substation that are most likely to be able to handle generation.
Can you say that within?
Within 4 miles. that doesn't guarantee that everything within 4 miles is, or that anything outside of 4 miles isn't available to take it, but if you're within 4 miles, that gives you less distance to require upgrades of the utility lines. 3-phase power needs to be very close, within 1,000 feet, ideally. If it's a 5 megawatt system, maybe you can expand or extend 3-phase power for as much as a mile. That mile is going to cost you $1 million. $1 million.
Hi, Beth.
Yes.
I just have a question. I'm a little bit confused. I was wondering if you could go back one slide.
Is this Hunter?
Yeah, sorry, this is Hunter on the Zoom from home. I was just wondering if you could go back one slide. I have a question about the details on the basics. So the community solar that you're describing here is really, I just want to make sure that the audience has an understanding that you are here in your capacity as an owner of Revision Energy, and that Revision is in the business of building community solar projects. But I just don't know if it's clear to me whether Revision is actually the owner of that equipment as it sits on the leased land, or and then is Revision then selling the energy to the community? I'm just wondering what the general business structure is of this proposal as you're laying out here in the basics.
Let me skip ahead a little bit. I know I have that in here somewhere. Here we go. Okay. Who gets the power? And that goes to your question, Hunter. There are two scenarios that we work with. Whether there are other opportunities or not, I'm not sure. I don't think so. We can sell shares in an array. So when I put solar on my house, I bought the panels and all of the wiring and paid for the installation. And if something goes wrong, I call in Revision and they take care of it. If you don't have a house that you can do that on, you might want to buy into one of these that's located in your utility. Say you need 10 kilowatts. You can buy 10 kilowatts out of that 1 megawatt system, pay the proportion of the cost to install and all of the panels and materials, and you own them, and you get a credit back, just like I do, on my utility bill for what I've produced above what I've used. It works very much the same way. The one thing that's different is that you're leasing land and you have to have somebody looking out for that solar array. So for a 10 kilowatt system, we would charge you $25 per kilowatt or $250 a year for the lease payments, which come due every year, and for the operations and management of that array, your portion of that array. It's a net metered system. It's owned by an LLC that is made up of all of the people who own shares in that array. Revision is the keeper of, we set up all of the legal and paperwork part of that, and we deal with all of the administration of that. But you own those arrays. There's no investor involved. There is an investor side, which is when the array is built and owned by an investor who has the money to put in, who can take out the income tax credit and can get some accelerated depreciation on the equipment. And so that is a valuable investment for some people. We have investors who we work with who like to do these projects and who have the money to do them. In that instance, usually it's the investor is selling the energy at a discounted price to larger users in that utility. So maybe a school, maybe a municipality, maybe a big company that uses all of that power. Maybe 2 or 3 companies. Could be schools, municipalities, businesses, and possibly community power towns who will have the opportunity to buy into generated electricity in the future, we think. Does that answer your question, Hunter?
Yeah, very clear. Thank you. I just wanted to, I wanted to have this clarified in case there were folks who were skeptical about necessarily the product or the service offering that Revision makes and other companies make, because in recent memory, some of us know of solar companies that engaged in unusual lease agreements with end users that were saving them some money, but the companies were really just getting super rich. So it's nice to hear that there are plenty of different ways that this shakes out and that this is not at all what that is.
And I'll say, just to clarify, that when we're leasing land, we don't know which way this is going to go. We don't know if it will be investor owned or if it will be owned by shareholders, in essence. It depends a lot on the finances of the array and the ability to build and the price structure of the opportunity. So that's all decided based on the financing and legal side of the potential solar array. Question here?
So when you are leasing the land and you're not sure which way it's gonna go, do you, I mean, ultimately, will you be writing the checks to these shareholders or people who buy into it? Or will the distribution utility be offsetting their bills?
The utility will be offsetting their bills.
So you won't get into that part of it. So,
No.
so you would be like the host until an investor bought you out, or?
The landowner is really the host. That's what we call the landowner. They are hosting this on their land. In the shareholding situation, we're the administrator. We're not the owner. The shareholders, if you had bought into that, you're the owner. The LLC that you are a partner of or a portion of, you are the owner of that array. There's no investor. Revision doesn't own it, but we administer it, recognizing that we have the capacity to do that.
But the check from the distribution utility would be written to you, at least in part.
There's no check.
There isn't it?
There's no,
So you don't even get a cut of that.
Again, we're getting into the details of finance that I don't know. But so for me, when I run my meter backwards and I have a credit at the end of the year, the utility sends me an opportunity to buy back that power. And they offer me a lot less than the value of the net metering. And I'll never say yes to that. I imagine, and I can check for you, I imagine that in this situation, the utility would do the same thing with the shareholders, or maybe they would do it with the LLC, and the LLC would make that distribution. That's into the weeds beyond my.
And then just one other quick question. There's no requirement that you have municipalities or hospitals or anything. These could be just families. Who are your shareholders who are getting, so there's no requirement there that from the state that they have to be when you have one of these large projects.
No, we believe in New Hampshire, we can do either, we can do both in the same, but we're still looking into that. In Maine, we're doing an individual one and a commercial one. And if you're a business or municipality or school, you're going to buy into the commercial one. And if you're an individual, you're going to buy into the individual one. So that is still being determined in New Hampshire, how that works.
But you're not going to have residential, you're not gonna have the townspeople, the town of Lyme participating in a 1 megawatt project.
If the people if let's say this, if we were to have a piece of property to lease in Lyme, and we were going to do an array that we have decided is gonna be for individuals and families.
Right.
And we're going before the planning board for approval.
Yeah.
I think we would be probably more likely to be looked favorably on if we gave the people in Lyme a first option at getting shares in that array,
You haven't done any of those, I think.
not in New Hampshire. We have in Maine,
So you,
but
let's talk about Maine. How do you do that? The financing comes from the townspeople. How do you get around securities laws? It's something you can't sell securities to these people.
when I say shares, I'm probably using the wrong business term.
Right.
And I'm not either a legal or financial wizard. So I'm probably using a lot of the wrong term, nor am I an electrician. When Lyme talks about doing this and covering all of the town's people,
Yeah.
I'm still struggling with how that happens. Because putting solar on your rooftop or on your front lawn or back lawn or buying into an array is a voluntary action. And I know that the goals of the town of Lyme are to cover the electrical use for all of the town.
Right.
And I'm not clear, you may not be clear either about whether you would like each person to buy into this, or if you simply want to have located somewhere in the town of Lyme enough electrical generation to cover all of the town and individuals and businesses that are located here without having those individuals and businesses actually buying that energy. So that is a question that I have. I don't know, are you gonna answer my question?
No, I'm actually gonna ask you the question. Maybe you could, it might be helpful if you talked about the current state of group net metering in New Hampshire. Because I think that's one of the, historically, that's been one of the things that set other states apart from New Hampshire.
Yeah, and again, I will address it very tangentially. I'm gonna look at the lower picture here. This is what was called community supported solar in Cheshire County. We did an array for a farm at a farm that powered that farm and group net metered in other farms. It was a joint venture between the Cheshire County Conservation District, thank you, and Revision Energy and the farmers. And the Cheshire County Conservation District did a lot of fundraising to make this happen. Because the cost of doing a small group net metered system is very, very expensive. Because the scale isn't there to cover the fixed costs. So that is an example of a group net metered system. I do all the community solar stuff, so I'm not versed in group net metering in this sense. I know that we've done it. I know that it has been done. It is not an easy thing to do because of the billing and all of that. So the model that we have is forming an LLC and having people join into the LLC. It's not enough detail, but
Yeah,
it's
no, I'm just
what I
trying to,
have.
I'm trying to think it through, because you mentioned credit, you essentially mentioned statement credits, so I'm just trying to figure out.
Federal income tax credits that are
Okay,
available
so
for
ITCs,
solar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's the same credit that is available when you put something on your roof at your home. Those are available broadly for solar. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
I'm still on the learning curve of the
Mhm.
CPCNH stuff,
Yes.
but I have a sense that this is where they're going with trying to have community solar, that is just the town or whoever it is, sells the power to CPCNH,
Mhm.
and that becomes the source, and there's no net metering problems anymore.
I don't know that it undoes the net metering issues, but that system would allow you to cover your town. If you put some arrays in, they were owned by the town, community power, owned by the town and fed into the community power system, then you would be supplying, that power to anyone who is who's chosen not to opt out of the community power.
They just got a
System.
CEO
Yes,
who was from New Hampshire
electrical.
Electrical, so he's hitting the ground running, and
Yes.
they said his first task was to fix the net metering problem.
So one thing that really confuses me, and what you were both just talking about, are the RECs. So if you're producing this energy in your town, but it's going out, the recipient gets the RECs, right?
The owner of the system always gets.
The owner of the system
The
gets it.
owner of the system gets the rights.
I thought wherever it went.
No.
Can I jump in here and provide some clarification?
Sure.
Hi, this is Hunter again. I'm going to share with the group a really nice PowerPoint presentation from the Public Utilities Commission on how group net metering, RECs, and all that work out. So I'll also pass that along to Dave. The RECs are received to the host, and that's how it goes.
And just, I'm confused about who the host
the
is,
host?
because we've had a couple of different explanations.
Yeah, so the host, and Beth just confirmed this for me, the host is the one who, where the array sits, say for example, it's on a farmer's land, the farmer has the array hooked up to the grid, to the power lines. He or she or they are the hosts, and if it's established as a group net metering, then you also have members, and those can be municipal buildings, schools, businesses, affordable housing. They can also be individuals as well, like you and I, as residential customers that engage in this project as members, and that relationship is with the host.
And the host gets the RECs.
I think we're talking
Correct.
about two different kinds of hosts. The host of the array in our language is the landowner. In these and I'm consistently talking about community solar farms, not net metering, not group net metering, not utility scale. In the instance where the owner of the array is the person who would get the income tax credit, I believe they would also be the recipient of the RECs, and they could choose to keep those or to sell them as they wish.
So it wouldn't be guaranteed that they would they could sell off those RECs.
Yes, yes.
Totally, and those RECs could disappear too if the PUC decides to move otherwise.
Right.
But I hate to sound like a fearmonger, that's probably not likely.
And let me say that in an investor-owned situation, it would be the investor who gets the RECs and decides whether or not to sell them. And in the instance of an LLC, I believe, and I'm not sure, but I believe that the LLC would get the RECs and decide whether or not to sell them, not the landowner. So.
Can you explain a little bit about the concept of RECs and what that really means?
I'm going to turn that to Hunter.
I mean, because you're building a system, the power is going out, it's being used by the people closest to the system. If it's net metered, it's being consumed by the user before it even goes out into the grid. So what is a wreck?
Hunter, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I just don't know if this is really the right time to go into these weeds.
Okay, that's fine.
If I can be candid, I think maybe we should cover this in one of our Lyme Electrical Aggregation Committee meetings, if that's okay. And I also do want to get this information in front of you. I'll send it over to David. There's some nice schematic illustrations that explain how all these pieces fit together and who gets what and whose responsibility it is for RECs and things like that.
That's great.
Yeah, so let's do that, if I can propose that.
That's fine.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
I'm gonna go back here and go to the process of setting up a community solar array. Just so you know some of the steps and the length of time, it is a long time. If you were a landowner talking to me today, and tomorrow we agreed to sign an option and a lease, or an option with a lease, an option to lease the land, I would tell you that it's gonna take me at least 2 years to get all of the permits and to do all of the due diligence that's necessary to see whether or not we can build. And then at that point, if we decide that we can build, we will sign the lease and go forward and build. Which for a 1 megawatt system will take a few months, and for a 5 megawatt system will take a longer time than that. But just a litany of the things that are necessary: identify suitable land, sign and negotiate an option to lease the land, due diligence, including title and survey, topo mapping, wetlands mapping, alteration of terrain permit from the state, town approvals, tax considerations, that's property tax considerations, interconnection to the grid. We can't, all of those have lots of words. The one that really is probably the most difficult is interconnection to the grid. And it takes a system study to confirm whether or not it will work and how much money has to be put into the system between the substation and the solar array in order to make it work. And that will determine often whether or not the system is financially viable. There's design and engineering. You get to the notice to proceed from the utility, then you sign the lease. You get the investors and the off-takers in there somewhere. This is not a calendar list of when things happen, and then we can get to installation. So this is a long process. And there's no guarantee going in with a nice looking piece of property that it's gonna come out the other end. It's the same as any proposal that goes in front of planning boards. People come with early stage thoughts and designs, and they may come in 3 or 4 times and they may find this isn't gonna work for us, we're gonna go home. So it's the same sort of thing for a solar array. We want to build these arrays where it's possible as quickly as possible and make them as efficient as possible. But we have to work it through the process.
Beth,
Yes,
can the off-takers be limited to the residents of the town of Lyme? Or property owners of the town?
if the town of Lyme is taking some of the risk of the project, probably.
Suppose it's not.
I don't think so. If we were to do something like that and we didn't have enough uptake, we'd have to go out to have others buy into it to make it a worthwhile project.
And you'll get, the uptake rate will depend on the price of the power.
Of the what?
the power, but the lower the rate, the lower
That's
the
right.
rate you charge, the more off takers you'll get.
Right. It, I think in New Hampshire, where, almost anywhere in New England, there's not enough of these out there. There's a big demand for them, at least right now. And the price has to be reasonable. And the price has to be comparable to putting it on your roof. But we're seeing that that's the case generally. If we're going to take on a project, if it doesn't look like it's going to be able to be done in a reasonably financially responsible way, that's one of the points where the decision would be made not to do the project.
Have you had success in getting residential off takers?
In Maine, yes, there are waiting lists.
Why is Maine better than New Hampshire?
Because of the policies that we have in place in New Hampshire that have made us a laggard in solar. We're trying to kind of push the envelope and get
But
this moving
in
to New
terms of
Hampshire.
market demand,
Oh, it's great in New Hampshire too. We just don't have anything to give people yet.
but if you had a 1 megawatt array in the town of Lyme, and the Lyme's regulations required you to sell the energy in Lyme,
Mhm.
could you do that?
With that regulation, we might choose not to build that array.
And why wouldn't you build it? If the
Because-
demand is there.
We wouldn't know if the demand is there until we get through the process. So I mean, these are decisions that will be made at a much higher level than mine, but if there is a limitation to the array of opportunity to sell those shares in the array, that would make it a less appealing opportunity for building. We would certainly want to, I mean, we have talked about and we intend to give a first option to the town that we build in.
Well, I'm not talking about the town as such, I'm talking about the rest.
Well, I'm talking about the residents also, yeah. Sorry about that.
But wouldn't the careful market study tell you whether there's a market?
We can. Yes, if there was a careful market study, but there's so much demand everywhere. I mean, I think we would work cooperatively with a town who wants to accomplish something like Lyme does. But I also think that the town of Lyme, if this is their goal, would have to take some of the risk in the project in order to make that happen. Instead of having the developer be the only risk taker in meeting Lyme's goal. Does that make sense?
Well, it does from the developer's perspective.
But from a businessman's perspective.
But going to Maine,
Mhm.
you mentioned that there's a lot of demand. When you said that, that demand encompasses the residential owner.
Mhm.
But it's also the large user.
Absolutely.
You could sell, I expect that you could sell all of the energy generated by a 1 megawatt array. To
To one.
two or three off takers.
Absolutely.
How much energy comes off the roof of the airport in Lebanon?
No idea. Does anybody else know?
One of the biggest ones around, but they consume a lot of it, I know.
Does anybody know? No. I don't know. All right. Let me zip through some more of this and just give you a sense of what these things look like. Installation, somebody said no concrete, I think, yeah. We don't use concrete. It is usually a screwed in system at this point. You screw in the supports, put the racking on it, put the solar.
Can we hold down the conversation so we can hear what Beth is saying?
Screw in the supports, put on the racking, the array, the solar panels go on that, and then they can wire from there. Is
Go down
this,
4 feet or something?
it goes down at least 4 feet, yeah. I think it's even, I think the screw portion may be 5 feet, I'm not sure. Are these impervious? A lot of, I don't know if your zoning has anything to say about impervious surfaces. But, these have spaces between the panels. You can see them there in upper left. It is open on all sides. Snow blows in, rain blows in. Is it impervious? I don't think so. But I don't know how it's qualified in your zoning. So, all right. The arrays themselves are made, if you look at the lower right and the upper right, you can see that these are steel I-beams that these are placed on. They don't bend. So if the land bends, it's challenging. So that is why you see more solar arrays on relatively flat land than on the hilly lands of New Hampshire, or most of New Hampshire. But we can do arrays on closed landfills. That's what that lower left-hand side one is. We use ballasted systems where we fill we fill gate baskets with natural rocks. The height of these on the north side is 12 to 15 feet and 3 feet on the south side. They need to be able to withstand strong winds and hold up to heavy snow. That's why you tend to see them lower to the ground. And we've talked about interconnection challenges already: distance from the substation capacity, single versus three-phase power, and the cost to upgrade. We talked about $1 million per mile of three-phase extension and line equipment, transformers, reclosers, $150,000 and up. And there sometimes are many of those. So when we get that report, it may be the report that says it is not financially reasonable to do this array. Costs are paid by the project, not by the utility. The costs for all of these upgrades to the utility lines. So there's no cost sharing.
You do any movable panels?
We have done them in special instances, but because of the increased maintenance and the likelihood of problems with a hydraulic, thank you, hydraulic system, it's much less desirable.
Fixed.
Yeah, it's all fixed right now. There are ways to make uses of the land underneath of solar panels. For pollinator species, there's agricultural benefit, wildlife habitat, and you can run apiaries in solar arrays. Sheep grazing has become popular. We have 4 systems last year that had sheep grazing under them, and that worked well. They do our vegetation management for us instead of running mowers that are run by fossil fuels. To keep the weeds down or keep the grass down. And agrivoltaics is an up and coming topic, usually with raised panels and growing crops in between and underneath of the panels. We did go through that slide already. And we have talked a little bit about size limitations, but I'll stress that economies of scale are really part of the reason why New Hampshire is not as built out, has not built as much solar as some of the others with a 1 megawatt cap. Those fixed costs have to be borne by the cost of the electricity. Smaller arrays are possible, but they can be prohibitively expensive. But if somebody is willing to pay to put that array in for that price, it's doable. So it's just a question of will somebody pay that price for solar or to own solar? And we've done that one. There was a question about runoff. Vegetation should be established under and around throughout the array, which should take care of most runoff and erosion. But site engineering is a big part of what we have to do, what is required. And so retention ponds and swales and things like that should take care of any potential erosion or runoff problems before they happen. And now, that's all I have. Thank you for your good questions.
Thank you for that. Handling so many questions about so many different things.
Well, I did preface it with, I don't know everything, just remember that.
One other question. I assume you're buying these panels.
Yes.
What, you know what the percentage is of panels that are made in the US and made out, say, China or whatever?
We work with a large buying group and we are very conscientious about buying the most responsible panels we can. All of the manufacturers, thanks to the IRA, are citing more and more and more manufacturing facilities in the US because there are now incentives to do that.
Okay.
So the percentage is going to be going up. I don't know what percentage we have. I know that, I believe that the manufacturers that we use manufacture in a variety of places. We are not sourcing from China, but we are sourcing from overseas in other places that have better methods. So we're very, very thoughtful about that. We have a procurement person who works with these folks regularly.
So none from China then?
No.
Yeah. You can't really source from China. Right now.
Yeah, because of the tariffs.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The Chinese solar panels with them problems for years.
When you look at the end of the life of a system, I know you probably haven't gotten to that yet in decommissioning. What are the possibilities of being able to replace panels instead of doing a complete tear out, you have a working system, just upgrade to newer? Is that ever part of the plan or is that even feasible?
I don't think we know if it's feasible. We don't know what will be out there in 25 or 30 years. It would be, I think it would be great if we could reuse a site, but the reality is that we can't see far enough down that road and landowners usually aren't willing to commit for that long. 35 years is a real stretch for somebody to commit their land for one use. Most people I talk to are not expecting to be at that piece of land if on this earth in 35 years. So it's a stretch for us to think that far, for us as humans to think that far ahead. So we're not sure what will happen. I will be retired by then. I hope. So, it's not perpetuity. That's the time frame I worked in when I was in land conservation. 35 years seems short to me. But for most people, it's a really, really long time. So that didn't really answer your question.
No, it's just.
Others? Discussion? I'm.
Hunter has.
I just thank you so much, Beth, for this presentation and taking the time to be with us all and share all of your knowledge. I just wanted to take the opportunity to just clarify that the details that Beth has provided are concerning community solar infrastructure, and the town of Lyme also has work afoot with the CPC and H and electrical aggregation, which is a separate issue, separate endeavor altogether. They are two separate items. So it's really just a point of clarification that I wanted to offer. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Hunter. It's been interesting for me as I sit on our community aggregation team in Canterbury to make the distinction between community power and community solar. And I'm glad to hear that Lyme is looking at that as well. I think it is one of the ways that we can help our communities attain better power, more renewable power. And there is 100% renewable option through CPCNH that is reasonably priced, though not as inexpensive as what some options offer
It's less expensive than what I'm paying for
for regular electricity. Yeah, yes,
yeah.
for Eversource or
Yep.
any of the utilities except NHEC. Go ahead.
Do you have any experience with hosting capacity maps that the utilities publish online?
There have not been any until recently. There is now an Eversource host capacity map
Yep.
that you can get on their website.
Right, and I guess what I was gonna ask is, what do you know how conservative those are? Because in Lyme, if you look at the Eversource three-phase
Mhm.
power
Oh,
line,
that's very good.
I think they are saying that they have like a 200 kW limit, which seems awfully low.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we have exactly the same question, and we haven't got any clarity as to whether or not that is a current day maximum that could be upgraded with improvements to the lines. And how that number came about. So we're still trying to understand that better. But I think we'll probably, I have some landowners who are on those kinds of lines, and when we put in pre-applications for interconnection, we'll get some sense of whether the substations have the capacity. And yeah, it's not until we have a full system study that we'll understand for sure whether or not the line can handle the array.
It's interesting that the main substation for Eversource that feeds Lyme is actually in Vermont.
Just right across the river.
Right, and it's actually owned
Interesting, yeah.
by Green Mountain Power.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, you know, there's questions that need to come from Green Mountain Power for what that substation can handle.
Interesting,
Is there a
yeah.
New Hampshire electric substations?
I don't believe there's any, not in Lyme. I'd have to follow the line back. It, basically the line comes in on the Dorchester Road, cuts across, down along Baker Hill, across, Goose Pond, and then disappears into Hanover, and somewhere in, beyond Hanover.
So that's an interesting map that we have to think about then, 4 miles from a substation and 1,000 feet, within 1,000 feet of three-phase. Those are the two
Mhm.
constraints.
And where's
we
the
need for our
Liberty
map.
substation?
It's challenging.
That's the one we're trying to,
Is it in which is the one south of, Main Street, Hanover? Is that Liberty?
I don't know whose that is. I'd have to, again, you know,
Yeah.
something that I didn't realize was important, so it's something I
Yeah.
need to start
Yeah.
looking at trying to
Yeah.
find.
Have to get out of your car and look at the label, Vicky.
Yeah. No, I walk by there all the time. There's a really nice trailhead and I just don't know whose it is.
And I'd have to follow the lines to see who, you know, where it feeds.
Yeah.
Like I said, I know their distribution in Lyme disappears, you know, down the Hanover line, out at the end of Goose Pond Road. So it's, you know, kind of a wilderness area and shouldn't be too hard to track, given the satellite imagery to find where it goes. And then maybe try to find that substation. And there may be some GIS data out there that has the substations. I'll have to look for.
Yeah,
Is the Bedford substation right there, up Route 5, or you head up? Yeah,
Off of 113.
beginning of 113.
Yeah, kind of sits down in that hollow area. They have a large transmission line that goes up and down the valley. And so you have transmission line there, and then from there, it goes up to Fairleigh, base of 244. There's another substation that goes out and feeds West Fairleigh and you know, areas out, that area, and then goes on up into Bradford.
So our three-phase power comes across.
From, for the, if you're from,
For Eversource.
for Eversource. Yeah.
I had a question about some of the bigger systems in terms of screening and security. Do
Thank
you
you.
generally, is there a size criteria that you always have to screen or always have to fence them in? And how far beyond the panel limits do you need to start that fencing and that sort of thing?
Good question. Thank you. That was one that I didn't fit into the presentation. We are required for any community solar array of 1 to 5 megawatts. I think the threshold may be 100 kW, but I'm not sure. I can look that up.
Do you have to fence it?
Yeah. And it's
fencing
because of
is-
the electrical system. It's a fence against humans, not a fence against wildlife.
So that's a 6-foot fence, an 8-foot
A
fence?
6-foot fence, 6 to 7 feet, yeah.
Okay.
We're using agricultural fencing now instead of chain link fencing.
Mhm.
Had been chain link fencing, which sheep farmers love,
Mhm,
but
Mhm.
most people don't like to look at.
mhm.
Agricultural fencing allows more wildlife through.
What does it look like?
Agricultural fencing,
Yeah.
it's a mesh, it's a square mesh, like about that size. Can you give me a finger there?
Yeah.
Thank you. And they woven wire.
Oh,
Yeah.
like pig fencing.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah, yeah. It's not.
The
cattle
little
kennels, it is
critters can
wood.
get through it.
Little critters can get through, but most turtles can probably go through if there's an egg laying place. I'll say there's a lot of research that needs to be done about what goes on inside and what can go on inside the fence for wildlife, for agriculture, for grazing, all of those things. Does fencing out some of the larger critters make it easier for some of the smaller critters to live there? Is there value in having a grassland with solar panels in it? I mean, I come from a conservation background, so all of those things are I'm very, very curious about. Does it become a haven for hawks because there's rodents all throughout there? I'm not sure. I don't think any of us really know. Because we're only in the first maybe 5 years in New England where these size arrays have been allowed and been being built. We're gonna learn a lot going forward. And we're gonna learn from what we do right and learn from what we don't do right. So.
And then in terms of screening, what are some examples of screening? And, you're trying to capture the solar, but nobody or some people don't want to look at it. So, and right from the get-go, they may not want to look
Yeah.
at it. So.
And
what do you do?
the most convenient and most financially appropriate place to put these is right on the road. Without a forested buffer, because if you leave a forested buffer in front of these on the south side, you've got to go back another 100 feet before you can, 150 feet before you can start the panels because of shading.
Mhm.
So having some kind of a low buffer, and in my, with my forestry and agriculture hat on, my preference would be to leave a natural buffer of lower growing shrubs and trees in that area in front of the fence and let that grow up. That's a lot harder to do in a construction zone than it is to think about in my mind. So probably planting things in front of those fences is what is gonna have to happen for screening.
But immediately then you're not really gonna have effective screening if people are not wanting to see these.
Yeah,
And
unless.
then once it starts growing up, you're gonna be, the solar owner is gonna be wanting to cut those down.
Shorter.
Or keep them short.
Short, yeah, they would need to be kept short. In fact, that's part of the lease arrangement, is that anything that shades the array can be cut by us at the cost of the landowner. So it behooves the landowner to keep things out of the shade, keep that shade buffer going. But as far as screening, not all of these are gonna be right on the road, so then that's not an issue if it's not right on the road. And, you know, we have not screened any, I mean, you can see from the ones that I've shown tonight. That's a new one. That one, the road is right here. Let's see if I can, no, I can't. Sorry.
Well, you're going back, so it's the Public Utilities Commission that makes the rules about limitations on size and also who can use the power.
It's not the PUC, it's the legislature.
Oh, it's a legislature.
Legislature
Okay, okay.
passes the laws, and I
Okay.
guess PUC would make the
Mhm.
rules
Mhm.
based
Okay.
on that. Looking at screening, again, these are not in locations that would require screening. The roads are
They
not
don't even have fences.
right there. They are fenced, but you can't see them very easily. The one in the upper right, you can see a little bit of fencing on the left-hand
Yep.
side.
Yep.
But the fencing is not,
It's not a screen.
unless you're right next to it, you don't really see the fence.
Just plant grapes on it. Take it off.
Well, that absolutely, why not? Or any kind of a vine.
Hops.
Yeah, hops, you need a bigger fence. Taller fence.
Hops get a lot taller than that.
That's right, you need a very tall fence, or at least tall poles.
Great.
Any other questions?
I have one. Do you have any sense as far as the technology in the future, or maybe nobody knows it, but is there any, in the industry, is there any sense of how small panels may get? I mean, you know, are they gonna keep getting smaller and generate the same amount?
No, they're getting bigger and generating more.
Okay,
So when I came to revision 2 years ago, we were installing 350 to 385 watt panels. They were 60 cells. Imagine a cell is like, I don't know, 6 by 6. And then they went to 72 cells and they got up higher. And then last year we were installing on arrays like this, 480s. And this year we'll be installing 585s. And a little bit of that is an increase in efficiency, but most of that is an increase in size.
So
They
are
are-
you getting more per area?
Somewhat. The big jump from the 300s to 485 was because those panels used in these situations are bifacial. So they get some gain from behind them, so irradiance from the snow or from plant life. So that is really nice to
More
see.
efficient.
But a lot of it comes from 485 to 585. I was pretty excited when I heard that, yes, I can fit more per acre. But the panels have gotten bigger, so you have to space the rows apart further so they don't shade each other. So you don't make that much of a gain.
So to Tim's question, is that an important improvement in terms of efficiency or?
We wouldn't have imagined that they would make the panels larger because they become harder and harder to handle.
Okay.
They're basically sails. So if it's a windy day and you're trying to carry one of those things, we're not putting 585s on a roof.
But one of the impressions that I get, because I'm just learning all of this,
Mhm.
is that like literally every week as I'm looking into stuff, it's like totally confusing because the assumptions that everybody had last week are now no longer. Is that?
It is like that for us.
Okay.
Yeah, things are changing very fast. That's good in many ways.
Yeah.
And it is confounding in other ways.
Yes, it's really good. Brad.
We really would love to have a stable atmosphere, but there's nothing stable about the solar industry right now. It's growing, it's,
Now the big
leaps and
investment in
bounds.
nuclear fusion, so maybe.
yeah, well,
Whole fear.
there's all manner of experiments going on and learnings about rust batteries. Wouldn't it be nice if we
Yeah.
could store energy in rust, and sand batteries? Wouldn't it be nice if we could store energy in sand? Forget this lithium stuff. You,
No, I was just gonna say that it sounds like we're not saying that for the next number of years, we could have a 1 megawatt system on 3 to 4 acres instead of 5 to 7. Probably not.
when I talk with landowners, I generally say, this is how much we expect today.
Yeah.
It could be that by the time we build your array, we can fit more on your property. And that's why we pay by the amount of energy that is installed on the site, not by the acre, which is so much easier to understand. But an acre today is less valuable to me than an acre tomorrow. So if an acre tomorrow is more valuable to me, why wouldn't I pass that on to the landowner? That part of that value. If the landowner's gonna give me the same acreage and I'm gonna be able to generate more electricity from it, our arrangements allow that lease payment to also increase because of that. Yes,
Is there any hope in the research that you've seen of them coming up with, basically shingles for a roof that are solar? So it would be a one shot,
yeah,
you know?
I mean, I fully expect that will happen someday.
Yeah.
Tesla has shingles out, but it doesn't appear that that is widely being used. I don't know if it's too expensive, too hard to install, too hard to maintain. I don't know. We installed Tesla power walls, but we have not seen the reliability in the shingle product that we would want to use yet. But I think, someday we're not gonna have just shingles on the roof, shingles on the front of the house, and yeah, it's when.
Well, to answer partially that, I've heard that the shingles put out less electricity, so they're just not as efficient. That's why they haven't really caught on, because, I mean, they work, but they're quite a bit less efficient.
I see.
So they just, you don't get enough, even with a larger,
Vicki, did you have a question?
Well, it sounds like you all do, battery installation as well. And I wondered if you've done that on kind of the municipal scale. Have there been schools or, bigger, not just a home, that have wanted, rather than having, say, a generator, have their backup in battery?
Yeah, our battery expert is actually up in the Upper Valley. Kim Quirk works out of our Enfield office and used to run the Energy Emporium out of there. And she is beginning to work on larger battery arrays. I don't know what do you call them?
Banks.
Battery banks. But we're not to the point of doing
So nobody's
really
doing that yet.
large. In places they are, I've seen it related to other large arrays in southwestern US and other places in the world. It's experimental, they're learning. I would say Revision is an early adopter, but only if we find the technology is reliable. So we'll look forward to that. I think the cars that we drive in 5 years are going to be the biggest battery bank that we have. If we can get the utilities to allow us to help them by discharging our batteries when there's a lot of demand. I don't know. We'll see.
Beth,
Yes,
you're from, Canterbury.
that's really.
You have community solar in Canterbury.
We didn't, we have adopted community power. We do not have community solar yet, but we are beginning to look at land so that when we accumulate, some money in the pot, say, from community power, that we will, be able to consider, powering, building a solar array. We don't know what form that will take in the town of Canterbury to help power those people who are on community power.
But in the meantime, the people on community power are getting power from above.
They are getting power from, the power that is procured from the CCPNH, the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, is the power that they're buying. The power that my next door neighbor is getting is probably sometimes coming from my solar array. And most of our power in Canterbury is probably coming from the trash to energy plant in Bow. I'm sorry, not in Bow, in Pennacook. So, yeah.
How much are you paying for green power from the community power?
The Community Power Coalition, there are 3 levels of green power. There are 4 levels of power. One is the amount of green power that's required by the PUC or by our utilities, for our utilities to procure. The next jump is to a 50%, and the one beyond that is 75%, I believe, or is it 66? I'm not sure. And then 100% renewable. All of those, I believe, currently are available for less than what you would be paying at utility supply rates. Yes.
And 100% green power
Mhm.
is what we've been getting from community solar.
That's right, yes. Locally generated.
Yeah.
But there's no storage, you'd have to be.
Right, that's right. It's all, I mean, when we talk about green power, solar power, net energy, we're always talking about, we're generating as much as we use, but sometimes we're using renewable and sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're generating renewable for somebody else to use so that they're not using grid power or utility power. And then sometimes we use utility power instead of the power that we sent to somebody else. It's all the electrons that you actually use, you can't identify unless it's sunny and your roof is working well. Then you're using solar.
Heisenberg says you can't tell.
Heisenberg? Wow.
You can't measure an electron.
Yes, I've been told that.
You can measure his cat though.
That's Schrodinger.
Oh, I knew it was one of those guys. Anyway, I promised Beth that she could get home in the next week. So if there are no more pressing questions, if there are pressing questions, I'll put it that way. Are there pressing questions?
I just wonder about the cost differential between community solar and APC and all green.
Moving target.
Well, yes, it is a moving target. Because
very, very different product. I mean, it's, in one case, you're talking about a newly built solar plant, and in the case of CPCNH, it might be Rex from a plant that's 15 years old. So it's really apples and oranges.
but I think what can be said is that when you build a solar array, whether it's for your home, your business, a community solar array that gets distributed to your people, when you own that array, and once you have paid it off, your energy is free.
All right, let's shut it down.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Beth.
so much.
You're
I really
welcome.
appreciate it. We battered you with.
Not at
all kinds
all,
of
not at
questions,
all.
so Really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed the questions. I wish I had been able to answer all of them.
Well, we'll have you back next week.
Well, and I'm sure I will have learned them all by then. If I said that I would get an answer for you, can you please come up and tell me what your question was and how I can reach you?
Okay, and before the planning board goes, let's get the minutes done.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as distributed to us.
Okay, I'll
That's
second that.
second.
Rich Meggie seconds it, and all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're done.
Yeah, I have an announcement.
Oh, and Tim has something he wants to say.
Yeah, I just want to let you guys know, I talked, well, I've been talking with Dina about Eversource,
Oh.
and Dina gave me the contact information this week. So I talked to Connor Jennings, and he, at Eversource, and he's the community relations guy for all of Western and Northern New Hampshire. So he's a really helpful guy, and so he's gonna talk to an engineer named Nate Duford. He said this guy is really good. And we tentatively talked about May 25th. I hope that, I mean, I didn't have the date of that, but, so Connor Jennings is gonna get back to me and let me know whether Nate Duford can come on the 25th. And it sounds like after tonight, it sounds like it would be really great to talk to an engineer from Eversource.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know, this guy.
Anybody.
Not that he'd have information to give.
anybody. from-
Yeah, well, that's it. But at any rate, so I just want to let you know that, you know, hopefully Connor Jennings will spread it up and we can do it on May 25th.
You're trying to get, the person from,
Norwich.
Solar.
And she has a tremendous amount of faith in revision and thinks that perhaps Beth may have answered all of our questions and
Well, if she's saying that, I think that's probably pointing in the right direction.
she's also extremely busy and lives in Waterbury and has other family life.
In that case, could you call her up and tell her we insist?
Yeah, but she would certainly be happy to come in, but she's not
She doesn't sound
available.
very happy.
Yeah,
So we're off the record here, right? now?
Yeah,
No, it's still recording. I can.
Okay, well, you know, I just want,